a lot of people have talked about the concept of getting Dillon Brooks. And now Dillon Brooks, obviously, I mean, he was on the second all defensive team this year. I mean, he's one of the better defenders in the league. I mean, LeBron would not necessarily tell you differently, but might show you a different look than that. But Dillon Brooks, you'd be getting a lot of defense there. The offense obviously would be a question. The like the character thing. Everybody that watches the league, I mean, he's Dylan the villain for a reason. But correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, has there been like locker room issues there? Because I think like on the concept of him leaving Memphis, like Desmond Bain was like, yeah, there's nothing but love for Dillon Brooks. We love Dillon Brooks, but this is like the way business is, with Memphis not really wanting to bring him back. Obviously, that means that the organization probably thought something of him. But I guess my point is that if there's a world where like Dillon Brooks could come into the Kings if they saw him as a worthy fit locker room wise and feel like he can kind of like better himself in that regard. But just to avoid all that, you're talking about a guy that is mostly a defensive player. There's some questions offensively. I feel like just to avoid any of that, you have to think about Kelly Oubre Jr. as someone that is a way better potential fit in that regard. The connection to Brown, I don't think he's been on an all defensive team, but he's a great defender. He is better. Like neither of them are really dangerous from three, but I think he has a better 2-point field goal percentage. I think he's got a few point advantages in the restricted area. Neither are particularly great there, but I mean, Kelly Oubre Jr. I think, could fill in starting three and really help the team out a lot. I mean, you'd be losing some spacing, but I mean, he averaged 20 points a game this season, 5.2 rebounds, over an assist, nearly 1.5 steals. I feel like that would be just such a great addition. And just avoid the whole Dillon Brooks conversation. I feel like if you're talking about Dillon Brooks, you might as well just go for Kelly Oubre Jr.
Yeah, I agree. You said it. Yeah, and Dillon Brooks and Kelly Oubre make a little more sense than the other guys because they're a little more realistic. They're actually unrestricted free agents who are, plausible signings for Sacramento as an up and coming team who might be able to pull one of these guys in. Dillon Brooks, yeah, I've been kind of confused. Like, I was like, why isn't Memphis bringing him back under any circumstance? Like, they were like very like, no, like we're done with this guy. And like I get he had like the Dylan the villain thing, and people were like giving him crap. But like, was he like an asshole? Other than that, I was kind of confused. Because I never heard any reports that.
How I understand it is that he like there's some like difference about how they envision him as an offensive player. Like, I mean, I think if you look at his stats, I think he had like a down year efficiency wise as an offensive player this year. No, he didn't. He did. Overall field goal percentage, he was under. Is that right? He was under 40%.
Yeah, I think he was I think he just took a lot of shots. So I think he scored like 18 a game, but I think it was very inefficient.
He wanted an up to roll. I think they tried to give him that, and then it just didn't work. I think that's roughly how I understand it. And
he scored 18 a game last year, and he dropped down to 14.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that was up efficiency-wise was the 3-point percentage, but it went from 30% to 32%, which is really 31 to 32. But yeah, I think it had something to do with that. There's this difference on the role and who they see each other as. So that could honestly be a huge issue, because if he doesn't want to play the role that he's honestly meant to play, most teams probably aren't going to want that. Now, some chump's going to sign him, but unless he really can settle in and accept a specific role that fits his skill set, that probably prevents him from coming to the Kings. And again, I don't know if it necessarily had to do with any locker room animosity. I don't really think any of that was there. But if you're going to kind of, I think one of the things that was probably a big turnoff in terms of character was the fact that he, after they lost to the Lakers, he skipped out on talking to the media, which is never a good sign. And I just think, like, just avoid that altogether. what you see in him as a player on the floor, I don't necessarily think that has anything to do with players not wanting him. Honestly, I feel like him being kind of a pest, being a trash talker, being kind of a dick out there. I think that's a lot of players, a lot of teams that want to contend could use that, and I think it's a benefit. But you add in, if you get outside your role, if you kind of think you're better than you actually are, that's going to create some issues. So, like Kelly Oubre, I mean, you're talking about a guy that would know his role. He would relish it. Obviously, the scoring would go way down, but
Mm-hmm.
you get him as a cutter. I mean, he'd be so athletic. He'd be so good as a cutter. You know, you
He's not
start.
like he's not Harrison Barnes at the three, like at the beyond the arc, but he's done up good years in his career. He's had a couple 34 years, a couple 35s. He's a career 33 on the nose 3-point shooter, which is, it's not an elite 3-point shooter, but he can hit them at a decent clip at points in his career. Maybe just really, I mean, he's also a good cutter, and you can get that out of him too. But so this is a team that relies on 3-point shooting, and I think he can bring enough of it, or you can still bring him in, and he can find other ways to score, like you were saying.
Right. And one of the things that I think is important to note about 3-point shooting is, what's Kelly Oubre's open 3-point percentage? I'm going to try to look for it because I'm pretty sure Will Z's stats would have it. He's got it all.
He does, I like Will Z.
But if I'm not mistaken, I think it's pretty solid as an open 3-point shooter, which that's what you'd want. And that's what the Kings would be generating, hopefully. The ability to move the ball around and spread the ball out and get open shots for guys. You would think that maybe, with the shooters around him, he would get more open looks. Let me just find out where that is.
I'm looking it up right now. So wide open 3-point field goal attempts. He is shooting 30. He shot 36% this year.
Okay, well, that's not as good as I thought, but it's better.
Well,
That's
that
really
was
not
this
as
year.
good as I thought.
And this year he only played 48 games. Last season on wide open, he shot 34. So open, he shot 36. Wide open.
Do you got the one where he was with the Warriors? Maybe there's some like.
Yeah, I think he was pretty bad on the Warriors, to be honest.
I
I don't think he had a good year in Golden State.
Yeah, he shot 31% overall.
Yeah, it was kind of a down year for him. No, actually, in Golden State, wide open, he shot 37. But open, he only shot 26.
That's a big contrast. But that's probably a better, what would you say, like better template for how the Kings would play. That's not crazy to say.
Yeah, that's a good point. Catch and shoot, like 30%, 32% this year. So I don't know. So it sounds like he's just going to probably shoot around 30. Oh, like he has a good year, he's going to shoot 34% from three.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, couple ticks down from what Harrison Barnes has been giving you the last, 4.5 years.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant drop off in terms of 3-point shooting. But defensively speaking, you'd be getting a massive upgrade. You get a legitimate perimeter defender and Oubre's pretty versatile with his defense, and that's probably always been one of his biggest strong suits. And
yeah,
Monty McNair talked about it last week or 2 weeks ago, rather, at his exit interview. It's like, it was an interesting way he put it. Is like, we had a net rating of whatever. I mean, the point is we need to improve that net rating, whether that means boosting the offense or, boosting the defense ever so slightly without losing too much on the offensive end. And I think if you're talking about Oubre and then maybe Vezenkov kind of coming off the bench or something like that, I mean, like, well, now you have like a really, really potential offensive threat mixed with a great athletic kind of cutting defender in Oubre. I mean, like, that could be a decent pairing. I don't want to get too out ahead, though. I mean, like, thinking about that, but I don't know. I really like the idea of the Kings potentially bringing in Kelly Oubre. I guess a question would be, would you rather have Barnes or Oubre?
Oubre. Just because he fits the timeline, and if you can sign him, I think he'll be a little cheaper than Barnes. I don't know, because, I mean, he did score 20 points. So he only played 48 games this year. I never know how contracts are in the NBA anymore. Like, what's Oubre's contract going to be worth? And what did he sign in Charlotte? I don't know. It's funny because I remember Oubre was like this big commodity when he left Washington. And he was like good in Washington. They went to the Suns and really started to take off. And the Warriors got him. He kind of had a down year, but he was still like Kelly Oubre. He was like a bigger name. Not like a star, obviously, but he was a pretty big name for like who he is, that like his type of role. And I kind of forgot about him in Charlotte the last couple of years. So no, I actually really like that Kelly Oubre. If they could sign him, that'd be great. Mostly because of his. I mean, not mostly, but I'd rather have him than Barnes. Like I said, for his age, and if you can sign him for 3 years, whatever, 3 years, 40 mil, 50 mil, I guess. And that's another guy you have locked up with Sabonis and, well, hopefully Sabonis, right? But at least probably Sabonis and Fox and Murray and Herter for, next couple of years. So he signed a 2-year, $24 million contract. So you're assuming he might make around the same, maybe a little more, maybe 15 mil a year.
I mean, I think he'd probably have to. I mean, if he's joining the Kings, he'd probably have to understand that he's not going to get the maximum money that he would want. So I guess that would have to factor into it, because it would be probably a little bit more than 12 million. But I don't know if you're gonna. I don't know what other teams would offer him. I guess that's kind of a big hold.
And it is interesting that he has been on Charlotte the last couple of years, because that can matter, because what Charlotte done the last 2 years. Like,
exactly. That's a great point.
It's like, well, maybe he's ready to win again, and he'll understand that he might have to take, instead of getting paid 20 mil maybe somewhere on some bad team, maybe he'll take 15 and play on a team that for the next 3 years will probably be in the playoffs and maybe help him become a championship contender.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, there's that factor, or there's the factor of, I've never scored 20 points per game in a season before. Let's cash in. So it could really easily go either way.
Yeah, but why did he only play 48 games? I'm kind of interested.
I don't know. I don't know. He must have.
Looks like he dealt with a shoulder injury for a minute.
Like, because on Fox Sports it says he dealt with 2 separate hand issues, and, well, it has it listed as probably the same thing in December, and then in March he had like a back thing and a shoulder thing.
It looks like he just kind of had the injury bug all year.
And I mean,
and Charlotte was probably kind of trying to tank, I'm assuming, too.
True. The year before that, he played 76 games. I mean, he's 27, going on 28. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily a huge concern, but it definitely is a factor, both in considering him and his contract, the fact that he played 48 games. But I don't know. Again, that thing of him cashing in on it kind of seems likely, because I don't think his role was enhanced because of did Hayward get hurt? Doesn't Hayward always get hurt?
I want to say Ball was out for a little bit too this season, and Charlotte was terrible. It was a bad team.
So like, you have to be honest and be like, well, if you're him at that point, he might never have an opportunity to put up a season like that. So like, that idea of cashing in on a legit deal.
But even cashing in on a legit deal, even if he's scoring 20 points on like the fourth worst, you gotta remember, he was on the 4th worst team in the NBA. So it's like, what was scoring 20 really like saying? Like, teams are going to look at that. It's like, yeah, Kelly Oubre scored 20 last year. Oh, on the 18 or 22 win Charlotte team, who was without everyone and probably had a score.
That's true.
I mean, people know who Kelly Oubre is in this league. He's been the same guy. I think he could get 20 mil somewhere, but on a real contender, I don't think he's getting 20 mil. And I think he knows that. But, maybe someone wants him.
Everything within the context. I mean, you make a good point there. So, like, maybe nobody wants to pay him as a 20 per game scorer.
No.
Because it's unlikely that people actually do envision him being that.
Yeah, I don't think anyone does.
And he's not going to be their savior.
No. He should be, like,
But you just have to imagine. You'd have to imagine that he's going to at least look for that. But there's a really good chance he's not going to get anything super great at that point. Oubre on the Kings would be fantastic if they could pull it off for like a decent amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Here's to hoping. He's like my next big thing. I didn't even think about him, but now I'm like, man, that'd be great. At least who's on the market at the moment. But I think he's a guy who could plug in very seamlessly.